From the very beginning, many empaths are taught, subtly or directly, that their value lies in taking care of others. As children, they notice the moods of their parents, siblings, or friends before noticing their own. If someone is upset, they instinctively step in, offering comfort or distraction. Over time, this becomes a pattern. They believe love and acceptance are earned by absorbing pain, fixing problems, or sacrificing their own needs. Carl Jung would say this conditioning pushes empaths to live outside themselves, constantly reaching outward while ignoring the inner voice that says, "What about me?" They become the reliable friend, the caring partner, the one who never says no. And although the world praises them for being selfless, deep down they begin to lose track of where their responsibilities end and someone else's begin. This is not simply kindness. It is a survival strategy learned in childhood. Many empaths grow up in environments where conflict, tension, or emotional volatility were common. To stay safe, they became peacekeepers, protectors, and healers. What started as a coping mechanism becomes an identity. But here's the hidden truth: protecting others always comes at a cost. Every time an empath absorbs someone else's sorrow, anger, or fear, it leaves a residue. It's like carrying invisible weights that slowly drain life force. At first it feels noble, but after years or decades, it creates exhaustion so deep even rest doesn't fix it. Empaths often describe feeling tired for no reason, but there is always a reason. They are carrying emotions that don't belong to them. This secondhand suffering causes burnout, anxiety, and even physical symptoms like headaches, body aches, or constant fatigue. And because they're so focused on others, they rarely pause to notice their own decline. The cost is more than exhaustion. Over time, empaths can lose their own sense of identity. Who are they without the role of caregiver? What do they actually want? Many struggle to answer because their life has revolved around other people's needs for so long. This is what Jung hinted at. When you suppress your own desires, your psyche rebels. Instead of peace, you feel emptiness. Instead of connection, you feel invisible, even to yourself. Carl Jung saw empathy as a sacred gift, but also a dangerous trap. On one hand, empathy allows you to sense the depths of another soul. It creates intimacy, compassion, and healing. Without empathy, humanity would collapse into pure selfishness. But Jung also warned, if empathy is unbalanced, it becomes a prison. He described the psyche as a system seeking balance. Too much outward focus creates inner emptiness. Too much sacrifice kills the spirit. Jung would call this an inflation of the persona. When your public role, the caretaker, the healer, the rescuer, completely overtakes your true self. For empaths, the trap is subtle. You feel important when others need you. You feel loved when you fix pain. But over time, that external validation keeps you from developing your own boundaries, your own desires, your own freedom. Jung's wisdom was simple yet radical. True empathy must include yourself. If you cannot show compassion inward, your outward compassion becomes distorted. It enslaves you rather than liberates you. Take Sarah, for example, a woman in her 40s who always described herself as the strong one. In her family, whenever her parents fought, she calmed them. When her partner fell into depression, she became his anchor. But one day she realized she no longer knew what happiness felt like. She was alive, but not living. Or Mark, a retired teacher. For decades, he poured his energy into students, colleagues, even neighbors. Everyone admired him, yet when he sat alone at home, he felt like a stranger in his own skin. He realized he had built his entire identity on serving others, but had no idea who Mark really was. These stories are not rare. They are echoes of what thousands of empaths experience in silence. That aching fatigue, that sense of carrying the world on your shoulders. that nagging question, when is it my turn? Hearing these struggles out loud makes many empaths feel understood for the first time, because the truth is, you are not broken. You are simply burdened, and Carl Jung's insights remind us, the burden can be released, but only when you stop confusing self-sacrifice with love. Carl Jung often spoke about the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we'd rather not face. For empaths, the shadow isn't made up of malice or cruelty. Instead, it's the simple human needs they've buried, the desire to rest, to say no, to demand respect, to live for themselves. Because empaths pride themselves on being kind and selfless, they often push these needs deep into the unconscious. They tell themselves, I don't matter, others come first. Over time, this creates a split inside. On the surface, they look generous and patient, but beneath, resentment, fatigue, and longing grow silently. Jung warned that ignoring the shadow always leads to trouble. What you suppress does not disappear, it comes back stronger, often in destructive ways. For an empath, this might show up as sudden anger, unexplained sadness, or even breakdowns where they can no longer carry the weight. The real danger, when empaths deny their own shadow, they cut themselves off from wholeness. Jung believed true growth only happens when you integrate the shadow, when you allow your hidden needs to step into the light without shame. There is a reason empaths often attract narcissists like moths to a flame. Jung would describe this as the dance of archetypes, the giver and the taker, the healer and the wounded ego. Empaths, with their open hearts, radiate compassion and safety. Narcissists, with their deep hunger for validation, see this as the perfect source of endless supply. It's not coincidence, it's magnetism. The empath offers what the narcissist craves: attention, forgiveness, and emotional labor. And the narcissist offers what the empath secretly fears: rejection or abandonment if they stop giving. It becomes a toxic bond where the empath gives until empty, and the narcissist takes without remorse. Jung would likely frame this as a projection of the inner shadow. The narcissist projects their hidden shame onto the empath, while the empath projects their hidden desire for love onto the narcissist. Both feel locked in roles they cannot escape. The tragedy is that this dynamic keeps the empath in cycles of pain. Every time they excuse the narcissist's cruelty, they tell themselves, maybe if I give more, they'll finally change. But they rarely do. Jung believed that energy is not just psychological, it's spiritual. When others constantly drain an empath's compassion, he might describe it as a form of spiritual possession. It's as if the empath's light becomes a fuel source for others who refuse to face their own darkness. Many empaths describe this experience vividly. After spending time with certain people, they feel lighter in body but heavier in spirit, like their energy has been siphoned away. This is what some call light feeding, others unconsciously feeding on their warmth, kindness, and presence. While the empath feels proud of being the helper, their soul pays the price. They wake up tired, disconnected, and sometimes even hollow. Jung would say this is not just exhaustion, it is the slow erosion of the self. The empath's essence is being consumed by others, leaving them vulnerable to despair and spiritual emptiness. The cost is profound. Instead of channeling their energy into creativity, purpose, or joy, empaths spend it patching up the wounds of others. Over years, this can feel like living someone else's life while your own slowly slips away. So how do you know when empathy has turned into self-erasure? Jung would urge us to watch for the warning signs. And they are often hiding in plain sight. First, constant fatigue, the kind that no amount of sleep fixes. This isn't laziness, it's a soul running on empty. Second, identity confusion, When you realize you don't know what you truly want, only what others expect from you. Third, emotional collapse. Waves of sadness, irritability, or emptiness that seem to appear without cause. Other signs include avoiding your own reflection, neglecting passions that once brought joy, or feeling guilty every time you think of putting yourself first. These are not minor struggles. They are signals that your true self is fading under the weight of others' needs. Jung's warning was stark. The more you neglect yourself, the more you risk falling into despair, depression, or even illness. Because the psyche cannot be ignored forever, if you refuse to honor your own life, eventually, your body and spirit will force you to stop. The path back begins with awareness. Naming the signs is the first step toward reclaiming your energy and ultimately your soul. For empaths, the word no feels almost dangerous. Since childhood, they've been praised for being the good one, the helper, the listener, the healer. Saying no risks breaking that image. What if people get angry? What if they stop loving me? This fear runs deep. But Carl Jung would argue that every transformation begins with this forbidden shift. Saying no is not rejection. It is self-preservation. When an empath finally dares to refuse, they begin to reclaim the energy they've been scattering everywhere else. The first no often feels terrifying. A friend asks for a favor, and for the first time you say, "I can't right now." The silence that follows feels unbearable. But something magical happens too. Your body feels lighter, your spirit steadier. You realize that setting limits doesn't destroy relationships. It reveals who respects you and who only used you. This shift is the first true act of liberation. By daring to protect themselves, empaths discover a power they never believed they had, the right to exist for themselves, not just for others. Jung described the journey of individuation as the process of becoming whole. For empaths, individuation means stepping out of the role of eternal caretaker and embracing all parts of themselves. The gentle, the strong, the light, and yes, even the shadow. Boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to wholeness. Without them, the empath dissolves into everyone else's life, losing touch with their own essence. Individuation demands a sacred balance, compassion, yes, but also self-respect. Think of it this way. The empath has spent years tending other people's gardens, watering their flowers, pulling their weeds. Individuation asks them to finally step into their own garden, notice its beauty, and decide what deserves to grow there. When an empath begins individuation, guilt often whispers, "You're selfish." But Jung would insist the opposite. Only when you know yourself, your limits, your needs, your truth, can you bring authentic love into the world. Otherwise, what you offer is only exhaustion dressed as kindness. The call of individuation is clear. Come home to yourself, so that your giving flows from fullness, not emptiness. At first, self-protection feels selfish. But paradoxically, it's the opposite. When an empath preserves their energy, they actually create healthier, more honest relationships. Here's why. When you constantly sacrifice yourself, resentment builds quietly inside. You smile while helping, but underneath you ache. Over time, this unspoken resentment poisons the very connections you're trying to save. But when you set boundaries, you give others the gift of clarity. They learn where you stand, what you value, and how you expect to be treated. Relationships may shift, some may fall away, but those that remain grow stronger. Why? Because they're built on respect, not silent martyrdom. Jung would say that by protecting your own light, you protect the world from your shadow. Instead of collapsing under the weight of overgiving, you show up whole, steady, and genuine. Your love becomes deeper because it's no longer drained, it's chosen. This is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to save everyone, you actually become more capable of true healing, not by fixing their wounds, but by showing them what self-respect looks like. And sometimes, that is the greatest gift of all. Even with all the wisdom, the first steps towards self-protection don't feel easy. They feel heavy with guilt, fear, and self-doubt. Empaths often hear an inner voice saying, "If I stop giving, I'll be abandoned. If I put myself first, I'll become like the selfish people I fear." This resistance is natural. Jung taught that whenever we grow, the psyche resists. Old patterns fight to survive. The guilt comes from years of conditioning, being told that love must equal sacrifice, that worth comes from service. The fear arises because stepping into your own power feels unfamiliar, even dangerous. But these emotions are not signs of failure, they're signs of transformation. Just like a muscle aches when it grows, the empath's spirit trembles as it learns new strength. The key is to reframe guilt as a signal, not a verdict. Guilt shows you're breaking old chains, fear shows you're leaving the comfort zone. Instead of running, breathe through it, acknowledge it, and remind yourself, protecting my energy is not abandoning others, it's finally choosing myself. In Jung's words, the path to wholeness always feels like death before it feels like rebirth. And for empaths, this resistance is proof that rebirth has already begun. Carl Jung believed that the key to wholeness was not just embracing our light, but also reclaiming our shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide, deny, or reject. For empaths, this shadow often contains suppressed anger, unmet desires, and the burning need for independence. Most empaths are terrified of these feelings. They think, if I get angry, I'll hurt someone. If I demand what I need, I'll lose love. If I walk away, I'll be abandoned. So, they bury these impulses deep inside. But the truth is, what we suppress does not disappear, it rules us from the dark. Jung's wisdom was simple: the only way out is through. Reclaiming the shadow doesn't mean becoming cruel or selfish. It means acknowledging your fire, your hunger, your right to exist without apology. When you integrate these parts, you stop being ruled by unconscious guilt and start living from conscious choice. Empaths who reclaim their shadow discover a paradoxical truth. Their compassion becomes deeper when they no longer fear their strength. By embracing both softness and power, they step into true wholeness, the balance that Jung called the self. Philosophy inspires, but practice transforms. Jung emphasized that inner growth requires daily rituals, ways to anchor wisdom into life. For empaths, self-protection is not a one-time decision, it's a lifestyle. Start with boundaries, learn to pause before saying yes. Ask yourself, am I doing this from love or from fear of rejection? That pause changes everything. Second, embrace solitude. Time alone is not loneliness, it's medicine. In stillness, the empath recharges, reconnects with their own soul, and remembers they are more than everyone else's caretaker. Third, use journaling and dream work. Write down recurring patterns in your relationships. Record your dreams. Jung called them messages from the unconscious. Often, dreams reveal hidden truths about where your energy is leaking. Finally, practice energetic hygiene, meditation, breathwork, or simple grounding rituals like walking barefoot on the earth. These aren't luxuries, they're survival tools for the sensitive soul. When practiced consistently, these tools shift the empath from a life of constant depletion to one of steady strength. Self-protection stops being a battle and becomes a natural rhythm, like breathing. The old story paints empaths as victims, forever drained, used, and unappreciated. But Jung would argue that staying in that story is itself a choice. When empaths reclaim their power, they rewrite the narrative. They stop being victims of circumstance and become creators of their destiny. The empowered empath doesn't wait for others to validate them. They know their worth. They don't beg for scraps of love. They embody love itself. And because they no longer seek approval through sacrifice, they attract healthier, more authentic relationships. This shift is profound. Instead of being defined by wounds, the empath becomes a source of wisdom. Instead of being consumed by others' chaos, they radiate calm. Instead of hiding their light, they shine it deliberately, choosing where and when to share it. This is not just personal healing, it's spiritual leadership. When empaths rise, they inspire others to do the same. They prove that sensitivity is not weakness, it is power once it is owned. Carl Jung's final warning is stark. Those who refuse to face their inner truth will be consumed by it. For empaths, this means that if they never set boundaries, never reclaim the shadow, never stop giving themselves away, they risk losing their very essence. This is not a poetic metaphor, it's a lived reality. Many empaths collapse into burnout, depression, or chronic illness because their energy has been drained to nothing. They spend decades saving others, only to find themselves broken, unseen, and empty. But Jung also offered hope. Every breakdown can become a breakthrough. The moment an empath chooses self-protection, the cycle shifts. No longer preyed upon, no longer enslaved by guilt, they step into their true self. The wholeness that Jung said is the purpose of life. So the choice stands clear: protect yourself or be consumed. This is not selfishness, it is survival, and more than that, it is empowerment. Because when you guard your light, you don't just save yourself, you illuminate a path for others who are still trapped in the dark. This is Jung's call, and it is urgent. The time for sacrifice is over. The time for sovereignty has arrived.